I remember when I was young, there was this story, and it was kind of like a fable. It was how bears got their short tails. And the story went something like this. These bears used to be in the Arctic, and they would fish with their tails. So they'd find a hole in the ice, and then they'd lower their long tail down into the water as bait, and the fish would bite their tail, and they'd pull the fish through the hole, and then they'd eat. This is how the whole thing worked. But one day, a bear was there fishing, and he fell asleep. And as he fell asleep, the ice grew around his tail and froze him. When all of a sudden he realized he had fallen asleep, he jumps up from the ice, and as he does, he loses his tail. And that's why bears have short tails. Now, not even Lamarck would subscribe to that theory of how bears have it. But we follow a logical progression there and see, yeah, that could happen. Just because it could happen, and just because it explains it, doesn't mean it's true. And so sometimes in our faith and looking at other faiths, we will see these things and we can follow a logical progression. And so in our mind's eye, it seems like, well, this is how it is, but that does not make it so. So we listen to the first letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians, and we listen to the gospel today, and it's all about the end times and the things that are going to happen. And for many people, that creates a lot of angst, because we don't know what's going to happen next. Now, faith tells us we go into eternal life, but we don't know what that's like. And so there's a lot of fear associated with that. Well, that's what happened about 200 years ago with a guy named Darby. And Darby's group of people around him were concerned about being Christian. They're essentially saying, if what's talked about in Revelation and what's talked about in the Gospels is eventually going to happen to us, and we're going to suffer these end times and this destruction of everything we know, well, why does it pay to be a Christian? I mean, if we're not treated special from the infidels, the people who don't believe, if we're not separated from them, why would we even be a Christian? We might as well eat, drink, and be merry while we're here, and then endure whatever comes after that. So Darby is struggling with this problem, and then he stumbled upon 1 Thessalonians. Now, we only get chapter 2 here, but chapter 4 is the basis on which he develops this theory of what is called the rapture. Now, you might have Protestant friends, and they might have talked about this rapture, and you might have thought, well, we believe that too. No, we don't. Just so you know. This is not some belief that has come from the first century of the church. This is something that came about only 200 years ago. They came up with this. There's a book out there written by Carl Olson, and it's called Will Catholics Be Left Behind? It's a pretty technical book, but it's a very good book. And essentially what the rapture teaches is this. Rapture comes from the Latin word rapiator, which means will be taken or taken from. It's, we get the word rob from it and some other words. It means taken. So they looked at this reading from Thessalonians. And the reading goes like this. You will be delivered up even by parents, that's Luke for the day. It goes like this. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words. In other words, okay, so the final tribulation is going to happen. Everything that we know of is going to be destroyed. But if you're a Christian, Jesus will come a little bit earlier and take you up into the air so you'll be spared from all this torture. Now this is a very attractive idea because most of us are Epicurean. We don't like pain and we pursue pleasure. Avoid pain at all costs and pursue pleasure. Most of us are afraid of the end. We don't want the end to come. think this world is great. There's nothing that can be better than this, right? So we preserve ourselves in as many ways as possible so that we might escape death. And this kind of thinking that says, wow, when this world ends, that's going to be a horrible thing, is what creates this fear. And it was the seeds for this theory of the rapture. And so for about 200 years then, he begins this practice. Martin Luther never came up with a rapture. You know, men of Simmons never came up with a rapture. Even Zwingli and Calvin, those guys never even thought of a rapture. But this rapture was the way that Christians could say, okay, we're not lumped together with the infidels now. We're not going to have to endure this suffering. So it begs the question that the author wrote here, will Catholics be left behind? So the rapture states that all those sort of believers will be taken up with Christ, and the rest will be left behind. And they got to kind of endure this tribulation. And through their suffering, maybe they'll turn to God. Now, I don't know if you know that, I think it's the late 80s and the 90s, there was this Left Behind series. It's a series of books about those people who were left on earth to try and work out their salvation. In fact, it spawned a bunch of movies by the same name. And so the whole thrust of this argument is that we will be taken up, the elect will be taken up before all this suffering occurs. We do not believe in this because it contradicts itself with Scripture. So what I read to you from Paul's letter to Thessalonians is the part that justifies this rapture. But you have to go a little bit before that to understand why he's even making this statement. The Thessalonians were concerned that at the second coming of Jesus, which we do believe in, by the way, this parousia, when Jesus comes the second time to end all things, to bring into fruition all the prophecies, when he comes that second time, that he is going to bring everyone who is saved, so to speak, with him. But the people were worried, well, what about my mom and dad who died already? What if I'm taken up and they're still here in the ground, or they don't have any salvation? So Paul had to address this. So this is what he said. This is only 2 verses before what I already read. He says, we don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, shall not precede those who have fallen asleep. In other words, he's trying to give the people hope. Let the people understand that we'll all be taken up together. So this is the end time. This is when Jesus comes back to take us to himself. This is a good thing. This reading from the Gospel of Luke is in Mark and Matthew as well, in different forms. But for this 33rd Sunday at the time of the year, this is the Gospel that is read. And it's very important because he talks about a number of things. He talks about these signs as the birth pangs. Now, I have never had a baby, but I have witnessed my sister having children. My sister. And you have these birth pangs. In fact, I can't even watch her because she's in so much pain. That was very uncomfortable for me. But once the baby is born, the pain is gone. It's like you don't think about it. You don't focus on that pain until they're teenagers. Then you remember how painful it actually was. But the fact is, the birth pangs to this suffering leads to new life. That's the whole point. We have to go through the birth pangs to get to new life. So they're all around the temple. And they look at the beautiful jewels and the brickwork and the masonry. This temple will never fall. Well, they should know it's going to fall because 400 years before it fell. And yet they're saying this is permanence. This will last forever. And that's why Jesus goes into this whole lengthy soliloquy, if you will, about how this temple will crumble. Not one stone will be left on another. That the moon and the stars will fall from the sky. They use the moon and the sun to tell time. They He uses stars to guide them in their ships and to make maps. So everything they see is so stable and permanent is going to pass away. That only one thing matters, and that is that we ultimately will be with Christ. So what about the rapture? Why isn't it true? Why can't we believe that we're going to be taken up before the rest of the infidels, that we won't be saved? Well, Jesus goes on to say, he talks about these last days, and this is what many non-Catholic Christians will use to justify the rapture. They'll say, oh no, look at the gospel. He says, one will be in the mill, the other will be in the field. One will be taken, the other will be left behind. Two people will be on a roof working. One will be taken, the other will be left behind. Two people will be sleeping. One will be taken, the other will be left behind. But they neglect the next phrase, which Jesus says, it will be like in the days of Noah. Well, wait a second. In the days of Noah, the ones that were left behind were Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their families. In other words, the good people were left behind, and the bad people were taken. He goes on to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, Lot and his family were eating and drinking and being married, and then the next day they're gone. It totally contradicts an attitude that the ones who are taken are the good ones that will be spared. Well, let's go forward even more. You know, we talk about the elect, the holy ones. They're the ones that will be taken up to be spared from this persecution. But Jesus will say in Mark's gospel, along the same line, for the sake of the elect, the days will be shortened. Why do the days have to be shortened if the elect are going to be taken up before all this starts? He tells his disciples, I mean, if anyone's going to be raptured, it's going to be his disciples. He says to them, flee to the mountains. Flee and run away from this, because you will not be able to withstand this terrible, pain that you experience. And so, if he's telling these people who are the saints, the best people, that you're all going to endure this suffering, but it will lead to giving testimony. Testimony, martyrion, from which we get the word martyr. In other words, it will lead to your death in my name. You think he would rapture those who are closest, but he doesn't. And so we have to be so careful that when we look at these things, that we're not just looking for the easy way out. Because I'll tell you, anyone can interpret Scripture. Ask David Koresh, he would tell you, he was there, was still around. He knew Scripture very well, but he interpreted it as though he was the Messiah. And that's why in our church, which is unlike others, we have to have the magisterium. We have to have the sacred deposit of faith. It's not enough to have sola scriptura, because anyone can translate Scripture, anyone can interpret it. But what we translate is backed up by the 2,000 years of tradition and the magisterium. So, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to give a little plug. Alright? Many times we'll say, well, I don't evangelize, I don't share the faith because I'm not confident in it. Or I went to my Catholic school and I had that education and it was insufficient. Or now I'm older and I can understand this stuff, but I forget what I learned back then. So we're offering a number of opportunities during the next 2 weeks through Advent and the starting of Advent to grow deeper into faith. So there's a book in here called Revelation. It talks about a dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. It talks about a woman that's riding a beast that's, drinking the blood of the martyrs and all this stuff. And we can see that because it's in the Bible and that can be very scary. So the Fridays during Advent, we'll come over here at 6 o'clock for evening prayer. And then we'll go over to the cafeteria and make some pasta and talk about the book of Revelation. And it's only half an hour. It'll be 30 minutes of a presentation. Maybe 32 minutes if I get carried away. Alright? But it's a short time, and it's beginning to unpack what's in there. Because this is not a mythology. It's not just some kind of nice little story, like a bear fishing with his tail. This is reality. And it's not only helping us to deal with things in this life, but it's preparing us for the next. is very important. And so I ask you to look at the things that are happening during Advent, the evening of reflection we had, the night that we have where you can ask the priest questions, and we have chicken wings and Catholic things, and all these others, the things going on, to grow deeper in the faith, to ask the question, how will this Advent for me be more enriching than the last one that I experienced? Because I will tell you this, our Christian brothers and sisters are different. They are growing deeper in their faith, and we must do the same. Because again, this is not about a world that we're shining from the end of. This is about a world that was never meant to last forever. And thank God, because it's the only way we can leave this world that has sometimes pain and suffering and enter into perfect beatitude with God.